მოგესალმებით. ჩვენი სიმპოზიუმის მეორე ნაწილს დავიწყებთ, რადგან ძალიან ბევრი უცხოელი მოხსენებელი გყავს, ინგლისურად ვილაპარაკებ და ანუ ვისაც დაგჭირდებათ კურსასმენები, შეგიძლიათ მოისმინოთ ორივე ენაზე. So I will switch to English. I will switch to English as we have many international guests today and panelists, so I will be moderating and talking in English today. So I'm really happy to welcome you here today on the second day of the biennial, because we opened yesterday, and we are happy to start the symposium, the second part. So I will shortly present what we will be discussing about today and how it is organized. So the second panel is dedicated to the topic of trans-socialist spaces, decolonial futures. It consists of two sections. So the first section is talking about peaceful pasts from the future and is moderated by Elena Markus. And second part will start after the break, and it will be discussing the trans-socialist spaces, futures of friendship, and is moderated by me and Michal Murawski, who is sitting here. Hello. I'm going to now slowly start introducing the panelists and welcome them on the stage. We will have Nini Palavandishvili and Elena Markus, who will be moderating, Manuel Herz, Dijana, Vučinić, and Armina, Pilav. And before we start, after all the panelists will finish the presentations, we will have a short Zoom with our colleague Maxym, and we will show a video about the destruction of Kiev TV tower. And we will also have a possibility to ask some questions to Maxym afterwards. So please, welcome.
So, since we don't have too much time, I'm not going to present everybody and just to welcome everybody participating in the panel and saying that I and we are very happy you all can be here, and that it's great and so important to talk about these topics, the topics of peace and war, which is obviously also here around us. The theme is overwhelming, and the friendship and the brotherhood and all these issues going back to the socialist past and to the post-socialist period we are still in, and all the questions are connected to. So I would like to give the word to you, Nini, and to welcome you to the panel.
Yes, hello everybody. I will be speaking in Georgian. Since we are in Georgia, though we have international panel, I will be speaking in Georgian. Მოგესალმებით ყველას. გადავწყვიტე, რომ დღევანდელ ჩემ პრეზენტაციას უწოდო იმპულსური დეკოლონიზაცია, რადგან ვფიქრობ, რომ განსაკუთრებით დღეს უკრაინა-რუსეთის მიმდინარე ომის ფონზე მეხსიერების პოლიტიკა და პოსტსოციალისტური თუ პოსტსაბჭოთა კონტექსტში კიდევ უფრო დროული და მნიშვნელოვანია ეს თემა. კოლონიური ან იმპერიული მმართველობის დროს აშენებული შენობები თავში ატარებენ ამ იდეოლოგიის და ძალაუფლების კვალს, რომელსაც ეფუძნებოდა მათი მშენებლობა თუ ფუნქცია. და დეკომუნიზაციის თუ დესოვიეტიზაციის პრინციპში ეს ტერმინი ქართულში არ არსებობს, მაგრამ შეიძლება უფრო სწორიც იყოს პროცესში ჩვენ მრავლად გვაქვს უკვე დაგვიგროვდა ის შენობანაგებობები, მემორიალები თუ ძეგლები და სახელგადარქმეული ქუჩები მათი საბჭოთა წარსულთან კუთვნილების და ასოციაციის გამო. როგორც ეს ბოლო წლებში უკრაინის შემთხვევაში ხდებოდა, საქართველოსაც განიცადა დეკომუნიზაცია წინა ხელისუფლების დროს, როდესაც პრეზიდენტმა სააკაშვილმა მიზნად დაისახა ახალი დამოუკიდებელი, პროგრესული და დემოკრატიული ქვეყნის შენება, რომელიც მას წარსული ცოდვებიდან გაათავისუფლებდა. და ეს პროცესი განსაკუთრებით ინტენსიური იყო 2008 წლის ომის შემდეგ. და მიზანი რომ ვიზუალური მახსოვრობიდან ამოეშალა მას ეს ეპოქა ფაქტობრივად სიტყვასიტყვით შეასრულა იმით რომ საბჭოთა პერიოდის ძეგლები საკმაოდ მრავლად დაანგრია თუ დაინგრა და ახალი თვალში საცემი თუ წამტაცი არქიტექტურის აგებით იყო დაკავებული. თუმცა უნდა ვაღიაროთ ისიც რომ გევის ეს ტენდენცია დღევანდელი ხელისუფლების დროსაც გრძელდება იმ განსხვავებით რომ მართველი ხელისუფლება საზოგადოებრივი დანიშნულების ახალს არაფერს აშენებს. აი, ეხლა. ამ ტენდენციის ერთ-ერთი საუკეთესო მაგალითია ყოფილი პარტიული ტრიბუნა, ეგრეთ წოდებული ანდროპოვის ყურები, რომლის დანგრევას მიახლოებით 10 წელი დაჭირდა. იმისთვის რომ მის ადგილას მისი ადგილი ახალ რესტორანს ჩაენაცვლებინა. თუმცა დღეს ჩემი თემა ცოტა მოჭრილია პრეზენტაცია, მაგრამ არა. Okay, ხო. დღეს ჩემი თემა მეორე მსოფლიო ომისადმი, ან მასში გამარჯვებისადმი, ან იმ დაღუპული ადამიანებისადმი მიძღვნილი სამი მემორიალი. სამივე აშენდა მეტნაკლებად ერთი და იგივე პერიოდში 1960-დან 80-იან წლებამდე. 1945 წლის შემოდგომაზე მეორე მსოფლიო ომში საბჭოთა კავშირის გამარჯვების აღსანიშნავად თბილისში დაარსდა ვაკის კულტურისა და დასვენების პარკი. პარკი გაიხსნა 1957 წლის 9 მაისს, ანუ გამარჯვების დღეს. 1960-იან წლებში მიღებული იქნა გადაწყვეტილება, რომ საფეხურების და ცენტრალური შადრევნის კომპლექსის ხაზი გაეგრძელებინათ ფერდამდე. აუზისა და კასკადის პირველი პროექტი შემუშავდა 1965 წელს, თუმცა მშენებლობა და მათ შორის უცნობი ჯარისკაცის საფლავიც დასრულდა 1975 წლის 9 მაისისთვის, ისევ და ისევ ფაშიზმზე 30 წლის გამარჯვების აღსანიშნავად. მემორიალის პირველადი პროექტი თავად არქიტექტორებმა შექმნეს და საარქივო მასალის მიხედვით იგი შედგებოდა წრიულად განლაგებული 20 მეტრის სიმაღლის სვეტებისგან. მათ ცენტრში კი უნდა ყოფილიყო მარადიული ცეცხლი. ასეთი აბსტრაქტული გამოსახულება სავარაუდოდ საბჭოთა მმართველებისთვის არასაკმარისად მიზანშეწონილი აღმოჩნდა და იმისთვის რომ ეს ომში დაღუპული გმირების უკდავს საყოფად არასაკმარისად რეპრეზენტაბელური იყო. საბოლოოდ შეირჩა უფრო რეალისტური და ფიგურატიული ძეგლი. ქვედა ბაქანზე განთავსდა უფრო უცნობი ჯარისკაცის საფლავი და მარადიული ცეცხლი. მის უკან კასკადი, რომელიც ჩაედინება აუზში, ხოლო ამ მეოთხედის სათავეში თუ ბოლოში, ანუ ყველაფერი სრულდება 28 მეტრის სიმაღლის ქალის ქანდაკებით, რომელიც სიმბოლურად წარმოადგენს გამარჯვებას. 1985 წელს უცნობი ჯარისკაცის საფლავის ირგვლივ მოათავსეს არქიტექტურულ-სკულპტურული კომპოზიცია სახელწოდებით რექვიემი, მეომრის 8 ფიგურის, რომლის ავტორია მოქანდაკე გოგი ოჩიაური. ამისთვის შეიცვალა ეს ქვედა პლატფორმა, დაემატა კვანძბეკები და გაკეთდა კიბეები. 1991 წელს საქართველოს დამოუკიდებლობის აღდგენისთანავე გაუგებარი მიზეზების გამო მეომრების ქანდაკებები აიღეს და მოგვიანებით ისინი გორის ციხესთან 2008 წელს ომში დაღუპულთა მემორიალთან განათავსეს. თუმცა არავის დაუსვამს ის შეკითხვათ, რატომ უნდა ყოფილიყო რუსეთის წინააღმდეგ მებრძოლთა სიმბოლო ძეგლი, განსახიერება ეს ძეგლი, რომელიც უკავშირდებოდა და წარმოადგენდა მან ვინც იბრძოდა საბჭოთა ჯარში თუ საბჭოთა ომში. 2004 წელს მხატვარ ზურაბ წერეთლის წითელი დროშების მოზაიკა, რომელიც ქვედა კუთხეშია მოთავსებული ფოტო, სპანო თვითონ თავად ზურაბ წერეთელმა შეცვალა საქართველოს 5 ჯვრიანი დროშების მოზაიკით. დაახლოებით იმავე პერიოდში სავარაუდოდ, სამწუხაროდ ზუსტი წელი არ ვიცი, შეიცვალა მარადიული ცეცხლის დიზაინიც. ამდენი გადაკეთების შემდეგ 2007 წელს ვაკის პარკს მიენიჭა არქიტექტურის, საბაღე-საპარკო ხელოვნებისა და ლანდშაფტური არქიტექტურის უძრავი ძეგლის სტატუსი. თუმცა შესაბამის დოკუმენტებში საერთოდ არ არის ნახსენები კონკრეტულ ძეგლთან და მის მოვლასთან დაკავშირებული მოთხოვნები. 2022 წელს თბილისის მერიამ გადაწყვეტა განიახლებინა დიდების მემორიალი. მათ მთლიანად გააშიშვლეს ძეგლი, მოხსნეს ორიგინალი გრანიტის ქვები, მთლიანად მოხსნეს შავადრევნის არქიტექტურული ელემენტები, რაც არის დარჩენილი, ეს არის სტრუქტურა, მოზაიკური პანო და ეს ქალის ფიგურა კასკადის თავში. ასევე არის ვერსია, რომ უცნობი ჯარისკაცის საფლავთან არსებული ის კვალცბეკები, რომლებიც 80-იან წლებში გაკეთდა, ისევ მოიშლება და ისევ გაკეთდება ბრტყელი ბაქანი. შესაბამისად, სამუშაოები, რომლებიც ამჟამად მიმდინარეობს ძეგლზე, არანაირად არ შეესაბამება და არ ღვევს ძეგლის მოვლის კრიტერიუმებს. მეორე მაგალითი არის ტონი კალანდარიშვილისა და მოქანდაკე მერა ბერძენიშვილის მიერ შექმნილი დიდების მემორიალი, რომელიც 1991 წელს დაიდგა ქუთაისში. ჭედური კომპოზიციით შემკული რკინაბეტონის 42 მეტრიანი თაღი და მის წინ გათავსებული ეგრეთ წოდებული მზეჭაბუკის ქანდაკება ხედარი მახვილით ხელში. როდესაც 2009 წელს მიხეილ სააკაშვილმა გადაწყვეტა ქუთაისში პარლამენტის ახალი შენობის აგება, არ მოიძებნა სხვა არც ერთი ადგილი გარდა იმისა, სადაც იდგა ეს ძეგლი. აქ უნდა ვთქვათ, რომ უკვე 2 წლით ადრე ძეგლი იყო ნაწილობრივ გაძარცვული და თვითონ ეს ნაწილი ამჭედური ხელოვნებისა იყო ამოჭრილი, ხოლო მზეჭაბუკის ძეგლი იყო მოხსნილი და ინახებოდა თვითონ მოქანდაკის სახელოსნოში. მსოფლიო ომში დაღუპული ათასობით ჯარისკაცის ძეგლის დემონტაჟი 2009 წლის 12 დეკემბერს დაიწყო, მიუხედავად იმისა, რომ ეს სამუშაოები უფრო მოგვიანებით იყო დაგეგმილი და ოფიციალურად გამოცხადებული, შესაბამისად არავინ იყო მომზადებული და არ იყო მიღებული უსაფრთხოების ზომები. აფეთქების შედეგად ჰაერში გავარდნილი ბეტონის ნამტვრევებისგან თუ საკმაოდ დიდი მოცულობის ნატეხებს ემსხვერპლა დედაშვილის სიცოცხლე. სააკაშვილის თქმით, მიუხედავად მომხდარი ტრაგედიისა, ამ ძეგლის აფეთქება იყო მაგალითი იმისა, თუ როგორ შენდება პროგრესული მომავალი საბჭოთა წარსულზე. 2012 წლის 26 მაისს საქართველოს დამოუკიდებლობის დღეს ქუთაისში გაიხსნა ესპანელი არქიტექტორების მიერ დაპროექტებული და 82 მილიონ ევროიანი ღირებულების პარლამენტის ახალი შენობა. შუშის შენობის გახსნიდან ძალიან მალევე, სულ რამოდენიმე თვეში, სააკაშვილის პარტიამ წააგო საპარლამენტო არჩევნები ქართულ ოცნებასთან, პოლიტიკური პარტია, რომელიც დაარსდა ქვეყნის ყველაზე მდიდარი ადამიანის ბიძინა ივანიშვილის მიერ. ახალმა მმართველმა პარტიამ დაიწყო პარლამენტის დაბრუნება თბილისში და უკვე 2018 წლის ბოლოს ქუთაისის პარლამენტმა სრულად შეწყვიტა ფუნქციონირება და საქართველოს მოსახლეობის გადამხდელთა ბიუჯეტით აღმართული ეს შენობა დღესაც უფუნქციოდ არის დარჩენილი და ჩვენ ისევ გვიწევს ორი პარლამენტის შენახვა ჩვენი გადასახადებიდან და არა მარტო ამ ორი შენობის შენახვა, მაგრამ ეს კიდე სხვა პრეზენტაციის თემაა. წელს ქუთაისის მერიამ 100,000 ლარის ღირებულების ტენდერი გამოაცხადა იმისთვის, რომ ზეჭაბუკის ქანდაკება პარლამენტის უფუნქციო შენობის წინ მოედანზე დაებრუნებინათ. ძეგლის ქუთაისში დაბრუნებას და ძეგლის რესტავრაციას და განთავსებისთვის თითქმის 30,000 ევროს გამოყოფას არაერთგვაროვანი გამოხმაურება მოყვა. საკმაოდ ბევრი ადამიანი ეწინააღმდეგებოდა მის დაბრუნებას იმ არგუმენტით, რომ ეს საბჭოთა წარსულში დაბრუნების მცდელობასთან აიგივებდნენ ამ პროცესს და ამტკიცებდნენ, რომ განსაკუთრებით პანდემიის პირობებში ასეთი თანხების გადახდა ამ ძეგლის დაბრუნებისთვის საკმაოდ არააქტუალური იქნებოდა და იყო კიდევაც. მიუხედავად ამისა, 2021 წლის მაისში ძეგლი ისევ დაბრუნდა ქუთაისში. მესამე მაგალითი არის მეხსიერების კუბი სენაკში არქიტექტორების შოთა ბოსტანაშვილის, ვახტანგ დავითაიას, გიული გეგელიას და მოქანდაკე ვაჟა მელიქიშვილის მიერ აგებული 80-იან წლებში. გახლეჩილი ბეტონის კუბი, რომლის ზედაპირის გეომეტრიული სიზუსტე ეწინააღმდეგება რეალურად მის შიდა სივრცის ქაოტურ პლასტიურობას, ეს მემორიალი ეძღვნება ასევე მეორე მსოფლიო ომიდან არ დაბრუნებულ სენაკელ ჯარისკაცებს, მაგრამ პრინციპში ეს აბსტრაგირებული გამოსახულება მრავალმხრივი ინტერპრეტაციის საშუალებას იძლევა და რომ არა მეორე მსოფლიო ომის წლების, ამოტვიფრული წლები ამ კუბის კუთხეში იგი არანაირ ასოციაციას არ იწვევს საბჭოთა წარსულთან. ეს მკაცრი გეომეტრიული ექსტერიერისგან განსხვავებით შიდა სივრცე თვითონ მოქანდაკის ვაჟა მელიქიშვილის განმარტებით ასახავდა და ასახავს ნაბზარ სხეულში ჩადუღებულ დიდ ტკივილს. შესაძლოა, რომ თემის საკმაოდ მეტაფორულმა შესრულობამ ხელი შეუწყო ამ მემორიალისთვის არამატერიალური კულტურული მემკვიდრეობის სტატუსის წარდგენის ინიციატივას, რომელიც არქიტექტორ ვახტანგ დავითაიასთან თანამშრომლობით თუ მისი ინიციატივით გაჟღერდა და განიხილეს 2019 წელს, თუმცა ეს მემორიალი დღემდე არ არის როგორც ასეთი აღრიცხული კულტურული მემკვიდრეობის ნუსხაში. ამ სამი მაგალითიდან, რაც მე დღეს თუ რომლებიც მე დღეისთვის შევარჩიე, შეიძლება დავასკვნათ, რომ თუ ჩვენ გვინდა რომ მოხდეს დეკოლონიური შემოbrunება არქიტექტურაში და არა მარტო არქიტექტურაში, ეს მოვლენები უნდა იყოს ისტორიულად შესწავლილი. წინააღმდეგ შემთხვევაში ჩვენ გავხდებით ნეოკოლონიური ძალადობის მსხვერპლი. და რეპრესირებული ისევ და ისევ დაგვიბრუნდება უკან. გახსოვთ ტრიბუნა, რომელიც პრეზენტაციის დასაწყისში ვაჩვენე და ის ახალი შენობა, რომელიც ჩაანაცვლა მან. და ჩემთვის საკმაოდ სიმპტომატურია ის, რომ დღეს რესტორნის ინტერიერში დეკორაციის სახით წარმოდგენილია ესეთი ისტორიული ფოტო, რომელიც ასახავს ამ ტრიბუნას თელმის ესეთ ანტურაში ოფიციოზები, რომლებიც დგანან ტრიბუნაზე და წინ არის საბჭოთა მარში თუ პარადი აღლუმი. და თუ ჩვენ ნამდვილად გვსურს, რომ გავაცნობიეროთ ჩვენი კოლონიური თუ იმპერიული წარსული, რასაც ნამდვილად უნდა ვერიდებოდეთ, არის სავარაუდოდ მსგავსი სურათების ხელახლა გამოყენება და ეგზოტიზირება ინტერპრეტაციის გარეშე. გუშინ ვნახე ერთი ძალიან საინტერესო გამოფენა, სამწუხაროდ პრეზენტაცია უკვე გამოგზავნილი იყო, ამიტომ ამ ფოტოს ჩართვა ვეღარ მოხდა გუდიაშვილის მოედანზე, თუ გექნებათ დრო, არის ესეთი პატარა გამოფენა მე-17 საუკუნის მაცივარი, სადაც ხელოვანებმა ძალიან საინტერესოდ წარადგინეს ზუსტად აი ამ ტრიბუნასთან დაკავშირებული ლენინის ბიუსტი და მისი დაშლა თუ დეკონსტრუქცია. რაც გონია, რომ ესეთ ხელოვნების კუთხით ერთ-ერთი ყველაზე საინტერესო მაგალითია, რაც მე მინახავს ბოლო დროს აი ამ დეკოლონიზაციის და დეკონსტრუქციის ამსახველად. ძალიან დიდი მადლობა მოსვლისთვის და უღმესი მადლობა ყველა იმ უკრაინელს თუ არა იმ უკრაინელს, ვინც იბრძვის ამ ომში და ამ იმპერიის დასამარცხებლად.
Thoughts and questions, but I think we wait until we finished all the presentation and can discuss it all together. So I'd like to invite you, Dijana, for the second one. Thanks.
Thank you, Elena, and thank you, everyone from TAB, for inviting me and for having me here. I come from Montenegro, which I feel like I should explain, because even though we feel that our cultures back where I come from and here in Georgia are somewhat relatable or close, I still see that some people maybe geographically need to kind of understand where we come from. So I'm from Montenegro. This is former Yugoslavia. I mean, it's middle of Balkans. And I will talk about monuments as well. But let's say maybe when I talk to Elena about what I should speak about, and I'm an architect, I'm a practicing architect, but we have a research platform as well, and we've been working a lot researching post-war architecture, Yugoslavian architecture in Montenegro, but also working a lot with education and this kind of reuse when it comes to this post-war architecture. So when we talk about war and peace, I thought, okay, we haven't been dealing so much with war in our work. The closest to war is this post-war narrative that we come across while dealing with heritage. And then I said, okay, I'll start from that. But when I started from that, I realized there is so much relating to post-war narrative that we work with. So I'll start with, this is work, okay, these are the posters of the exhibition we have done in past several years. Let's say we were cut by COVID, so it extended, but we did a long research over maybe 2.5, 3 years of work of Svetlana Kana-Radević, which is this famous Montenegrin and Yugoslavian architect. She did most of her work in this post-war period, and when I say post-war, I mean post-World War II, since there are many wars in the territory of Balkans, so I kind of need to explain that. And Svetlana Kana-Radević was this great individual, great architect, but also great individual and very involved, very creative on many aspects. I'm not going to talk about her so much. We presented her work in Venice Biennale, in this last architecture Biennale in Venice, and then we presented the exhibition in Podgorica in Montenegro after that. Why I want to mention her, I mean, and she was, she received this great Borba Award, which is the greatest award of architecture in Yugoslavia. She was only 27 when she received the award. She still remains the youngest architect to ever receive the award and the only woman. She received the award precisely for this building, which is a hotel. And it has, let's say, nothing to do with the monuments, the war monuments in a way, but it is a hotel that has been built during this post-war period, this great period of Yugoslavian, let's say, overall modernization of the country. So Podgorica, then called Titograd, this new capital, kind of a new city that was completely demolished in World War II, but then rebuilt right after the war. This was the first major international competition that Svetlana Kana-Radević won just out of school. So she graduated the same year, and then the first project she has ever done has been Hotel Podgorica, where she won the competition and the eventually Borba Award after the hotel was open. Why I wanted to show this project also before is to kind of, yes, explain her work a bit, but explain the relation and this continuity of her work through other projects, including monuments. This is, you can also see Kana right there in the corner in this photo. And we have been really lucky to research her private archive for many years and find some really amazing stuff there. This is the hotel now. It has been somewhat preserved, although the entire interior has been renovated, which is really a shame. This has been done in 2005, while the outside remained pretty much what it was. This was a competition drawing that we found within the archive, and it really shows how, you know, the project that she later developed was really true to the original drawing. These are also drawings of the competition. Both of these have been also shown in MoMA in New York in this great exhibition about Yugoslavian architecture. And this is another amazing historic photos that we have found in the archive, Yugoslavian archive in Belgrade. And what it really shows is how important this work is, and how important this building is in relation not only to the city and to this great modernization of Yugoslavia after World War II, but also how it connects to the landscape where it has been built. This is Morače River that goes through the city of Podgorica, but through the canyon in a way. So the hotel has been built on top of the canyon in a way as well. And it shows this materiality. You can see this is part of the old town on this bank of the river. You can see the stones that she also used in the facade. The stones, the pebbles actually, have been extracted from the riverbed and then used on the building. It's her really kind of nice way of connecting the architecture to the space where it was built. And this materiality, this question of materiality is actually extremely important in her work, and we'll see that through the project of the monument in Barutana that I will show. This is the hotel when it was built. These amazing terraces that go over the river of Morača are still impressive public spaces today as well. What is very important in her work is how she really created these spaces for people to interact, for people to communicate, and in rare interviews that we have today from her time is actually what she talks about her architecture, that the architecture is the place where people meet and people kind of gather and have the moment of exchange and kind of gather this collective thought. So these are the recent photos as well, and they show exactly these pebbles, how they covered the facade that was originally concrete, but then covered in pebbles. But you can also see the prefabricated parts of the terrace that come out of this building, and how this prefabricated part means this in situ built walls of the hotels. So now what's also important about this materiality is that this material that she thought was really important for this building went throughout the building. So you can see the cross-section here that exactly shows this, that the pebbles were from the outside taken inside and through the public spaces of the hotel. This is the part that has been actually destroyed during the renovation of the hotel some 17 years ago. And you can see these spaces inside what they were back at the time when the hotel was built. So she did the entire interior, all the furniture has been designed by her, all the lighting has been designed by her in public spaces and in rooms as well. This is her receiving Borba Award. These are parts of what we exhibited also there. I mean, this is the original Borba announcing the award. This was really a big deal in Yugoslavia. Architects who won Borba awards were somewhat star architects of Yugoslavia back at the time. They were really then part of this kind of social landscape, and they were really well known. This earned her immediate commissions for some very important buildings. So by the time she was 35, she had 6 really important already buildings built in Montenegro. After that, she went to US for graduate studies under Louis Kahn, where she did her master under Louis Kahn in University of Pennsylvania, and started her PhD, which was really amazing for a woman back in the 60s and 70s. After that, she worked with Kisha Kurokawa and had this amazing career. Why I showed this drawing, which was really important, and we found it in this kind of a folder of kind of not so important artifacts within her archive. And you can see here the cover page of Arhitektura Urbanism, which was this famous magazine about architecture and urbanism in Yugoslavia. And you can see that it's actually the drawing that she did here, but kind of adapted for the cover. What is also important about this drawing, and you can see this element in front of the what seems to be the entrance to the one of the sketches for the entrance of the hotel. And this maybe some of you recognize as something that reminds you of the famous monument of Bogdan Bogdanović. But it's important to mention that because she was also studying under Bogdanović in Belgrade University, and there is a lot of maybe exchange within these drawings and within letters that they exchanged and so on. But what was for me important here is, of course, her interest, which was also the interest of many architects at that time, and this is the interest for building of and designing of monuments of Yugoslavia. This is the monument of Barutana, designed by Svetlana Karnaradević. She actually designed it worked on the competition while she was already in US in the 70s, and she sent competition material by mail to Montenegro to kind of participate here, and she won the competition for Barutana Monument. Is just outside of Podgorica. And what I talked about earlier, and that's this materiality that was really important for Kana, and I think it's really important to talk about this today, because what she did is she really understood what were first and how important it was to identify the local resources, how important it was to identify what is material that is available on site. And besides that, she really understood the capacity of local builders, of local workers, how they can work, let's say, with concrete, how they can work with stone, and what is it that they can produce. Here we see the drawing for the the drawing that was the plan from the main design of the project of Barutana Monument. And you can see these stone walls that go around this kind of artificial landscape that she creates, this memory landscape, and how this later is translated into materiality is really interesting. This was the competition drawing, where you can see this connection to the landscape as well. This is a photo of the opening. Now, what's important to kind of mention, this is already early 80s, and this is the same year when Tito died. So instead of having this great celebration of opening of Barutana Monument, it was kind of a sad gathering, but still an important gathering. So the stone that you can see, these stone walls all around, is stone that is gathered from the location right there. This marble that it's a bit blackened here now, the monument has been renovated, but I haven't included those photos. The marble is also local. It's maybe from a quarry that is maybe like 8 kilometers away from the location. And when we talk about monuments, yes, of course, it's important to identify what's the ideology behind it, what's the history behind it. It's really important to kind of understand the time when they were built, why they were built. But for me, it's also important to understand the intentions and the ideas of the author behind it. And of course, this is when we talk about architecture, this is what we talk about anyway. But when we talk about monuments, the question is how we use them today, how we see them today, how we see this sustainable future of these monuments. And if we think about the sustainable future, I think it has to relate closely to what the authors had in mind and what the commissioners had in mind when building them. And when I say commissioners, back at that time in Yugoslavia, it was really people, also the state, also the government, yes, but it was really people. And yes, it connects to some kind of political landscape, and maybe in Yugoslavia is different than here. And we talked about this yesterday, kind of informally, because after World War II, in communist and socialist Yugoslavia, there was a drift away from Russia and Soviet politics. And this has caused a bit shift that put Yugoslavia somewhere in between East and West. And how we see monuments today in Montenegro, it's not the same in other places that came out of Yugoslavia. How we see these monuments is we really see them as these witnesses of this great victory within World War II. We really see them as these anti-fascist monuments that we still connect to in our in major politics, let's say in Montenegro as well. But another thing that I really think it's important when we talk about monuments is this spatial potential and this potential of architecture and space created that they give us. And today, when we see this monument, today, for example, there would be many, let's say, concerts organized here, as it seems like an amphitheater that would host events. There would be even some political parties organizing gatherings here, as they think that their politics come close to what this monument represents in this sense of political landscape. But I was really interested to find out how Kana actually saw this space, how she, what was public about this public space. And one of these aspects about monuments and one of these narratives around monuments have largely to do with memory. These monuments are really kind of memory keepers, and this one is particularly kind of connected to this narrative of memory. And if you see these kind of small elements that seem like seeds, let's say in our folklore, in our tradition, when someone dies, people gather, they gather at their home mostly. They sit around all night, all day, or 3 nights and days, depending on the culture, and they sit around in these very traditional small chairs that we call shkanj, or it's called differently in some other places. And this is what this actually small seating element refers to in a way as well. How Kana saw this, she saw this as an, in a way, opportunity of a collective commemoration. So it's a space of a collective commemoration. If it's an amphitheater, it doesn't mean it's suited for events. It just means that we can be there and collectively think about those who lost their lives for freedom back in World War II. And I'll go back and talking about this monument finish when it comes to this materiality. This is during the construction, and Kana is there. She was always, even in a construction site, present as this very feminine figure in heels and dress around the workers as well. This is a photo right after the monument was built, and this is one of the photos from the construction site. And when I talk about this knowledge of the capacity of the working force and this knowledge about the resources, this photo exactly shows this. The local, the workers were local. There were people from the village. They didn't have to be skilled in order to build this monument that we see now as one of the great works of architecture. They just had to know how to work with the stone that they lived with for generations. And she understood this very well. And the way she designed the monument is she designed it with the knowledge of this. Just like in Hotel Podgorica, this is why I showed both of these. And this is Kana, the construction site, visiting from US with one of the workers. I'm going to just quickly go back to kind of try to explain where we started this story with monuments. And this is, we for 6 or 7 years actually, did this Kotor summer school that was based in Kotor, which is on Adriatic Sea. It's a UNESCO city, and within a Kotor Bay that's also part of UNESCO heritage. And the prison building where we located our school is this big building at the bottom of the photo. The prison building is also a monument of culture, also protected by UNESCO. It was built by Austro-Hungarians, and it always served as a prison, first as a their prison, and then as a political prison during the Yugoslavian times, and then as a local prison. But back it was closed down and then never used, and then the building, when we entered, it hasn't been used for like 10 years. We decided to have school there, and our big inspiration was Korčulan philosophy school that was also during Yugoslavian time, bringing people from east and west in this in the middle of socialist Yugoslavia, which was rather unusual. So this was one of the monuments, and the first monument we dealt with. And we basically, through several years that we've been there with the school, we showed that you can use this space in many ways and still not change anything about it. You don't have to basically rebuild anything other than some necessities. We lit the windows, and people that lived within the old town Kotor for generations that have never been inside were finally able to come inside and see the prison. So with this, we basically, through our program, we did a project that actually served as a base for the prison to be then renovated and now used as a cultural center. So I'll just show a couple of these photos and just try. This is the Numen for use that we did there. From there, we work with many monuments and with many reuse projects. And what I wanted to show, again, using program to reactivate buildings in order to show how they can be used. But what I actually wanted to show is this project, and I'll finish with that one. Dom Revolucije is a huge project by Marko Mušić that was built over 13 years almost in Nikšić in Montenegro, and it has never been finished. It stayed like that. I mean, this is another project by Marko Mušić, Spomen Dom, and these are the buildings that we showed in Venice Biennale in 2014 and as part of Montenegro Pavilion. But from there, we decided to kind of work on this project of Dom Revolucije. These are the photos of Julien Lanoux that he did a couple of, actually 5 years ago in Nikšić. And through this project, we really had the opportunity. The project has been done with, also with Sadar Vuga from Ljubljana and HHF from Basel. What we did with this project is we actually used this knowledge about how monuments work, how this potential of architecture and potential of space can actually be the only thing that we need in order for these buildings to work. So within this huge building that's actually occupying the entire block, and that's actually more done as an urbanism project, like closed urbanism project rather than just architecture, we decided that the only way to kind of put this building in use is to use only 10% of it, really. So 10% of this building would be used. There was this formula, 10 plus 20 plus 50 plus 30. Yeah? The only one part of the building would be used as a closed space, covered space. The rest of it would be just public space. It would be like urban landscape. And a large part of it would not be used at all. So there would be a fence where you can see this space, but there is no need to renovate it, no need to invest money in it, and in a way, it's also a way to deal with monuments. So we would call these spaces plug-ins, the spaces where that would actually be interior done, and then there would be these public spaces like streets that you just we basically put in infrastructure that would allow it to be used as a public space, and then the rest of it would just be closed for the public. So the idea behind this is really to show that what we need to know about these monuments is how we need to understand the space, we need to understand the architecture, and we need to think about how to use these existing potentials instead of investing in rebuilding, recreating, reprogramming. Out of this, the program, in a way, comes out itself. I'll finish here.
Thanks for the invitation. I think it's really good to be here, and also I'm happy to meet friends and make new one, and also to discuss our past and present and somehow immediate future with the colleagues from Sarajevo and also from Montenegro. And it's nice how things actually resonate, what Dijana was saying, but also what Dunja and Irhana were saying this morning, that most of you were not there, but doesn't matter. So, I would like to start this presentation on architects in the war destruction relying on two different statements from two different historical times and contexts. Oh, I have to get used to this. So, one statement is related to the interview that I had with Jonas Friedman in 2016 in his apartment studio space. And I was interested in his architectural project and thought after the World War II, and also I wanted to discuss with him what happened with Sarajevo during the siege in the 90s. And then, yeah, it was a really long conversation because he didn't hear well in that time. So he suddenly said that today every city is in the war. So this has many layers of thinking, and I think everyone could draw something from this. The next one is related to the Arch magazine that was made by Association of Architects of Sarajevo during the war in 1993 exactly. And they mapped very in detail how the city was destroyed in that moment of time. And two authors, Palavandishvili and Vučinić, wrote that architecture, whatever it may be, good or bad, expensive or cheap, representative or not, is material medium which most directly, with exception of human victims, and most convincingly reflects terrible war destruction consequences. So, in relation to these two statements, my question for today is, who is architect in the wartime city or in the cities in the state of a destruction and or exception? And which could be related to any city that Jonas Friedman also kind of had in mind when he said that. So we have thoughts about her or his selected position, political or cultural, special condition of their work, like places, tools, scales of intervention, what is extremely important in every gesture of architecture that we are planning to do, and the definition of individual role or group practices, so changing profession, undoing architecture, and sometimes architectural control of destruction, what we will see further on. But before I go into the detail, I would like to show you what kind of context I did research. So it's about Sarajevo before the war, war and after the war. And somehow this image, I usually use that image to kind of start this conversation. And what architects were asking themselves in that time was where to start after the destruction. And you have this, what's next, So I found some kind of relationship between the thinking process. So this is the map of Sarajevo. From 1984, we hosted the Winter Olympic Games. It was the first time that Eastern European country actually did Olympic Games. It was a common socialist state, and also voluntarily the whole infrastructure around the Olympics was done on voluntary basis, like big working, actions and activists. We would call them activists today. And it was hard time, later on I found out that it was very expensive operation, but we never in that time talk about it, and people were suffering due to all these constructions. But also some other things were done, like first environmental analysis or plan for the city, and different neighborhoods that today are used for living. And we actually won this competition to host Olympic Games because it was defined as a magic circle. Everything was happening in 25 kilometers from the Olympic, slopes and the mountains. You could be in the city in half an hour of 40 minutes, depends which part of the city you live and which mountain you want to visit. And, you know, like the whole Yugoslavia was looking at this, how to say, Bosnian winter touristic future, but not just a few years after, the war happened, and this is the same map that was explaining the vision that is not so densely populated. Was organized in a way that architects were serving the state and the people. There was no, is it something important? Shall I reply? Okay. So there is no, how to say, there was no private practice, and there was no, so the operations that she showed actually were kind of possible because of this, how to say, a consistent system of how thinking and planning the space, let's say. So all architectural offices were public. There was no any private. So the solution of Yugoslavia started in 1991 with the political crisis, 10 days war in Slovenia, and then the war moved to Croatia, and then finally to Bosnia in 1992. And the city of Sarajevo was besieged, as I mentioned just earlier, and somehow this was also a very violent transition and contrasting, like starting from a socialist system of governance and production of space into the war and subsequent destruction of existing social and spatial formations that we still are kind of witnessing. And many architects also died during the war in their homes or emergency work, so they completely changed, how to say, their operational tools. And here we are talking about a contemporary war in the city that you are facing all the time, and you have to adapt your way of living and doing, let's say. And war also introduced new architectural elements, as well as urban. One made due to the constant bombing and destruction, and the other due to the survival, how to say, practices of the citizens, like made as a response to this violent destruction, let's say. So the city also was divided between above the ground and underground city, and there are serious differences between the life in the underground and withdrawal from the really like the surface, and also in some kind of concrete, how to say, staircases of the modernist buildings. There were different spatial strategies to you know, like to exist and to survive. So everything was closed, like shops, electricity, all lifelines were destroyed, water supply, food, like everything was kind of rethought by the citizens in that very moment, and of course huge humanitarian aid most of the time and other agencies that were operating in that time. It lasted for 4 years, so it's quite long period. Okay, so in the war context that I just kind of showed very partly, there were many levels of engagement of the architects, and somehow they accustomed the pre-war design analytical tools to the war context, and they're creating through uninstitutional forms, because we didn't have any institutional operations in that time. It was all emergency and war and military government, actually. For architectural language and temporary methods of analysis, and kind of very independent but related practices. And so I just listed some of the, how to say, of the professions or, yeah, like adaptive roles that they took. Faculty was still working, so they also taught and were fighting, and some students as well were soldiers and students of architecture. So there is this culture of producing the architecture during the war that is a bit different than usual. And also like many interviews and publishing, as you could see. Finally, I will show you 3 examples of the work of 2 architects who were living in Sarajevo. Ivan Strauss, who passed away in 2018, and Zoran Dorschner, who is still among us. And Lebeus Woods, that I'm quite sure that you are all familiar with him and his work. So Ivan Strauss was one of the most, how to say, productive Yugoslavian architects, not only in Yugoslavian territory, but in the countries of non-aligned movement. What Dijana mentioned, when Yugoslavia stepped out from Russian alliances, we found another one that had its own, how to say, production of culture and architecture and relationships, and Tito, Nasser, Nehru, historical note, but anyway. And Strauss gave an interview to the Life magazine. It was fake Life, not the Life that you know, UK related. It was kind of joke on that, not joke, but kind of, how to say, mirror of that specific. So they asked him, what word do you not use anymore? He said, a project, building, business trip, summer and winter vacation. So these are some buildings, I mean comparative of Unis towers that Strauss designed and destroyed towers during the war. I'm just showing you two of them that are kind of part of this presentation and research as well. And the other one is Elektroprivreda or electric supply building, and this is also the building, I think for now, I think the Strauss probably is the only architect who built his building twice using the same project, and who actually extended a little bit his project to make it better after the war. And yeah, I brought a piece around this, like building again, and Times loves architects, somehow related to this specific, building. Okay. In Strauss in 1991, this is the interior of Elektroprivreda building. Ivan Strauss in 1991 was pensioned, so he finished his career of an architect and he decided to write a diary. And the idea of his diary was like to present himself and his projects. He was also very active around competitions, and also Dijana mentioned Borba prize that was very important in Yugoslavian context. And when he started to write this diary, war broke up, so his diary took two parallel themes. One of the construction and one of the destruction of the city and state, how to say, through the space. And so what also is important for me in this specific diary, I was never a fan of his buildings, and he knew that. I did a lot of interviews with him, we spent a lot of time together, but we were always talking about this specific diary. And he also described how architects respond to the conflict and destruction in conversation and professional exchange, but some of them also limit themselves within the new state and the new national single projects, as Croatian architects Tomislav Odak and Branko Silagin, so they took some other position because architects were really active in writing statements to Milosevic against destruction, and this is what is happening in Ukraine now. Architects are giving all the time some statements from Russia, and there is some kind of agency in that specific. And then second part of the diary is also when he's describing this, how to say, destruction of Sarajevo and his own buildings. So he was watching from his terrace. This is reenacted scene. For example, how Unis towers were burning, and then in the interview he told me, like, my wife, Nana, they both died. She was trying to kind of make it easier for him, and I was telling him they are beautiful also when they are burning. That was kind of her comment on. And also he was moving, I mean, they spend a lot of time in the shelter because their building is on the hill. Dunja also grew up in that building. That's an interesting coincidence. And so listening to the radio, and on the radio they would all the time publish what was destroyed, so he would note that in the diary. So there is whole, how to say, note on what was destroyed. And Strauss also in his diary introduced the term systemic destruction, that I read as a destruction happening day by day, almost as design destruction of important buildings like post office, lifelines in the city that I already mentioned, hospitals, and many other buildings. The other actor of this talk is Zoran Dorschner, who did completely different work, and also it's quite related to his own profession. So he was an architect who designed many dwelling houses in Sarajevo, worked on many projects. He's in his 80s now, maybe 86, very still bright, and also we are friends and talking a lot about this past work that they were doing. And Zoran Dorschner looked into the modernist project of the 100 square meters flat for the family of 4 members and how this destruction happened day by day and how the flat was transformed into the living space. And he also coined the term destructive metamorphosis that is quite interesting. Okay, I'm almost there. That is quite interesting as idea. So this is the 100 square meters flat that is kind of modernist, normal, how to say, 4 members family apartment. And this is the Dorschner adaptation of that drawing into the semi-destroyed flat with one space to live, like the whole family would move to like the safest part of the apartment. And somehow he explained all the actions or activities that were done during the war. And this is actually his drawing as well of he called them war design objects. It's not my interpretation of his work. It's actually, he was very explicit about what he was doing and knew very well how to explain what was happening. And finally, we have Lebos Vuč, who came to Sarajevo first, to our territory in 1991 with his exhibition Zagreb Free Zone. He presented in the Museum of Art and Crafts in Zagreb, and he also came to Sarajevo, but also became very interested in the war destruction. And in 1993, he came to the city as a journalist. You could not enter and exit the city in a very easy way, so he kind of faked his identity or managed to have these documents. That's also a certain privilege, let's say. And he was very interested to present his war and architecture pamphlet and kind of introducing different strategies how to behave or what kind of architectural gestures we could have in the destroyed city. And there are these famous theories by him, like injection, scab, and scar, that he also met with different architects in Sarajevo in that time. And this is Elektroprivreda building according to Strauss. He gives some proposal. He and Strauss had some discussions how to rebuild this building, but it didn't work out. And Strauss said that the political ambience in that time, the city was not in favor of this. And I also studied Strauss' archive in New York, in his private flat, or Lebos Vuč archive. And it's not very clear what happened. I didn't find, at least no one didn't want to tell me what really happened in this attempt of the collaboration. Okay, so looking at the case of Strauss coming to Strauss and Lebos Vuč and Dorschner, there is also the question, what is the role of the architect during the war, is actually really important. And Teresa Stopani wrote an article or paper about Vuč's projects and the war, and she was very critical to it. And it was eye-opener because, for me at least, because Lebos Vuč is like a star because his beautiful drawings and thinking of space, but I think this is very accurate comment or critique to his work. And I would also like to conclude because I took a lot of time. So, in my opinion, Strauss and Dorschner took a position of architect documentarists and react to the present situation defined by destructive processes and ephemeral architectures, where the actual project in the traditional form is absent or impossible. They were doing fast observations from the distance and underground, recording of the modernist housing plans, selecting relevant cases of destruction, listening of the radio and sounds of destruction, and many others. So architects' observation, the condition of fear, creates temporary images of architectural forms because their next observation of the same building after some hours due to the bombing can result with different forms. So in their work, traditional building forms rather transitional space of writing or reappropriation of the spaces, and geometry is rather represented with the asymmetry, imprecision, and irregular forms. Comparing their work to Lebos Vuč during the war, we can see significant aesthetical differences as well as use of the destroyed environment in drawings or text. So work of Dorschner is epistemic space as well as experimental that perform function of destruction and reconstruction, that he defined destructive metamorphosis without any dramatic visual effect. While Woolf's work contains the dramatic side of the destruction, with attempt to redesign and control sharp forms of the ruins, as a reminder on the materiality of the city produced by the bombing. So writing of the diary by Ivan Strauss is a strategy of mediation, so something in between probably, between architectural practice, military destruction, architectural culture of reaction, produced in state of exception by architects who were forced to change the traditional role and become some new agents, responding with flexible tools and methods that I read as non-design, learn from the everydayness and spaces in between the violent destruction, citizens' non-violent spatial reactions. So, thanks.
Hello, Maxym.
I can hear you okay.
Yes, we can hear you really well. Welcome to Tbilisi online. Hello, and sorry for letting you wait. So I have introduced you already to the audience, and maybe you want to say a few words before we start to show the video, and then we can have a little bit of questions.
Or, yes, it's a very good job as well. I'll just say that I represent the team for some special technologies. You know, before the invasion, we were dealing with a bunch of different topics, and in fact, the audience of this Armina, I had a chance to see some of the work before when, when we were presenting last year, I was showing stuff that has to do with issues, sustainability, and we dealt with a bunch of other problems such as housing issues related to inflated housing prices, housing equity, and stuff like that. But of course, things have changed for us now. There was one project that we did before the war which had to do with topics of genocide, war, trauma, which had to do with Palavandishvili. And you'll see some bits of it in this video, and I'll briefly say that, the work we did for Palavandishvili Memorial Center lasted for around 2 years. The work is still a bit unfinished. And, that work relates to this place in Palavandishvili, which you can see in the video. I wanted to say that, our office and the place where I used to live in Kyiv are very close to Palavandishvili. And in fact, from my window, I used to see this view towards Kyiv TV Tower and Palavandishvili territory. So that place is quite kind of like personally special and close. And of course, what you will see in the video is our first investigation. As soon as the missile struck the TV tower, another missile missed it and struck one of the buildings that were planned to be turned into a Holocaust memorial. We knew that this is our first case. What you see in the video is a collaborative work with Herz architecture, which talks about that particular attack and precisely the attempt to understand what exactly happened. And so I'll end with saying that if you want to follow our projects, do investigations, and work on places, say like Mariupol Drama Theater, which was bombed with an airplane on the 16th of March, you can subscribe to the Spatial Tech Info Instagram page, or we also publish all of our investigations at investigations.support. This is it for me. I'll let you play the video.
Yes, thank you so much.
The March 1st Russian strike on the TV tower in the heart of Kyiv has raised a number of tragic historical echoes. Landing in the vicinity of Palavandishvili, where one of the worst massacres of the Holocaust took place, it led to condemnation from all over the world, including a brief from President Zelensky, who said it negated a post-war promise of never again. Russian spokespersons claimed that operation was conducted in order to prevent information attacks against Russia. The strike did seem to be a part of a pattern. The following day, TV towers in Arctic and Lysychansk were hit. On March 14th, one in Rivne, and on March 15th in Vinnytsia. But questions of what exactly was hit and the tragic significance of the historical site still lingered. The Ukrainian group Center for Special Technologies and Forensic Architecture gathered over dozens of videos, maps, and archival materials in order to study how these strikes hit not only media and communication networks, but a tangled nervous system of historical references and repressed memories. This video
and the city limits of Kiev. And on the 29th of September 1941, in the early morning hours, 34,000 Jews assembled on that square thinking that they would be resettled. In fact, they were all shot. They were all killed. Not a single one survived. You've seen these photographs before. These are taken a few days later by a German Nazi photographer and represent in a way the only evidence that we have, or some of the only evidence that we have of this mass killing. We see Babin Yar massacre in connection with a number and a series of other similar massacres that had occurred while the Nazis were moving through Ukraine, shooting all the Jews of all the cities that they passed through. It is what has become known as the Holocaust by bullets. About 1 million people died in this way, in a kind of anonymous killing in the forests, outside of the villages, outside of the cities, leaving almost no traces. Therefore, Babin Yar stands as total for this Holocaust by bullets. It's one of the worst massacres of the 20th century. In the shortest of time, 35,000 people being shot. City center of Kiev is on the right. We see the location of Babin Yar. I was commissioned in October 2020 to design a synagogue on this location in a way to bring back Jewish presence, living Jewish presence, onto the site where he was murdered 80 years previously. And I was thinking, now we have much. What you see here is this kind of flora basically growing out of death. Now we have a new landscape of bodies out of which then this kind of trees are growing. And when I was commissioned, I was thinking, now how as an architect do we respond to this almost unbearable massacre, this unbearable violence that we as human beings are capable of doing. And the intuitive response would have been maybe, and we know this as a kind of genre of memorial architecture, would have been to do something that is very heavy, that is very minimalist, maybe, very somber. And also this we know, these kinds of, these Holocaust memorials that are basically a huge amount of concrete or a huge amount of stone. And we've seen some other kind of monuments before today that also have this kind of architecture of heaviness, architecture of somberness, but also they direct the visitor, they choreograph how the visitor interacts with the monument. There's usually a symmetry, there's usually a perspective. You are supposed to stand in one and only one perfect position, and then there's often a slogan, which is what you're meant to learn or read or understand or what it is dedicated for. And I thought, this is not right. This is not the right way of doing because